Today we're talking about one of my all-time favorites, the top shelf, highest tier, hands down best that I have ever read.
Uncanny X-Force. This comic series, Rick Remender, there are no words. If you've read it, you know exactly what I'm talking about. If you haven't, read it. Read stuff by Rick Remender. That man is a genius. He knows how to write comics. And Uncanny X-Force was one that I got turned on to by the coworkers when I started working, we've talked about before, working at the bookstore, collecting comics. We were getting the new 52 Batman, especially, things like that. That's where I started. And then going to comic conventions a couple times a year down in Atlanta, Georgia. They were comic conventions. I have no idea if those are still going on, but actual comic conventions they rent out a ballroom and a bunch of vendors come, and then they set out their wares, which is just boxes of comics, and that's where a lot of my comics came from. Uncanny X-Force was one that unanimously, between the 5 other people who were collecting comics and going to these conventions with me, suggested I start reading, because just fantastic. It was already coming out. We were doing this in the early 2010s. This started in 2010 and then continued until 2012. They had 35 issues. Probably I started buying them in 2011 or 2012, now that I think about it, because as soon as they mentioned it, I started looking, because I took them at their advice and, started looking for comics and found them and started looking. What I found a lot more of was Uncanny X-Men, and I went, oh, is this what we're looking for? And they go, no, there's hundreds of those. You're looking for Uncanny X-Force. And yeah, I actually managed to find some. And I didn't find too many, and they were often not in the price point that I was. See, that one looks like it's $4, even though that's upside down. This one was $5. Yeah, I paid a good bit to get all of these, especially going through this stuff, but well worth it. Now, one thing that they did let me know here was that number 4 would be really hard to find. The first story deals with them being sent to kill Apocalypse, who was reborn in the form of a child. And not a huge spoiler, but a little bit. When they get to that point, none of them can summon the courage to kill a child. That conclusion and other stuff is issue 4, which I don't have right here. That one I could not find. I mean, I'm talking about I spent years looking for it. I had my list everywhere I went. I always went and I looked, and I would dig through, and I would go to the U section and dig through for Uncanny X-Force. And after a while, I was able to get most of them, and here or there I had an ongoing list that I would check for of stuff like this. But number 4 eluded me for so long. They had a low print issue apparently, and there was a big plot point. That one undoubtedly is worth the most of all of them. Usually, in my experience, a number 1 is worth the most, but that number 4 is just... I wanted to collect all of them because it was only 35 issues, which is a lot less than some of the other things I was trying to collect at that point, and I wanted to do that before I started actually reading them. So for 3 or 4 years, I just bought any Uncanny X-Force that I didn't have, until finally in 2015 I figured, alright, I'm just missing number 4. I want to read through all these. Also, I had moved in with my girlfriend's parents in their house, and I needed some time alone. So that was a good opportunity for me to finally sit down and read them. And what I did was I read the physical copies until I got to number 4. I bought that one digitally so I could read it on my tablet. Then I went back to the physical ones so I wasn't having to rebuy comics digitally that I already owned physically over and over again. Fantastic story. I mean, still to this day, as I said, one of the best storylines I've ever read, all the way through. I know that people have their own opinions. Everyone's entitled to it. That's fine. I know some people somewhere in the middle didn't care for what they were doing with that stuff. I liked it from start to finish, all the way through. So, 2015, I finally read through the story, and amazing, right? Just fantastic. Around that time, I know that because of when I was living. I have hard dates on my living arrangement thing, so I do know exactly when that was. Now, I'm working alongside my brother, who I've talked about before. Big time comic collector, buys, sells, the whole thing, right? I'm telling him about this Uncanny X-Force and how good it is, and he goes onto the message boards and sees that other people are talking about it, so he knows that it is true, it is true with that kind of stuff. And then he starts buying graded comics of number 4. left and right. Maybe 5 or 6 of them. We're working together. We work in the same office. We get deliveries to the office, which is much better than getting deliveries to your home, because they'll deliver, you know the people, they know you because you get the same delivery people over and over. And they'll leave them there at the office because there's always somebody there during business hours. You're not at home, and then it sits on your porch all day, right? So they would always come in there, and of course, whatever newest comic he got in, he'd come show me and we'd talk about it. We were real into comics for a good while with that stuff, and every single number 4, I just got jealous and jealous and jealous. However, on my birthday in 2016, he gives me a present, and it is comic shaped. And I start opening the present. And I've got some images here. I took images because it was a fantastic, very funny, and I'm going to share that here with this stuff. So, as you go through them, they are arranged in a certain order with sticky notes so that you can read through them. So we have a number 1 issue of Superman, an issue of Iron Man, Alien vs. Predator, something called Heroes Inc., Batman Rebirth number 1 that I loaned him to read and he was just giving it back to me. And then amazingly, an issue of Uncanny X-Force number 4. And on the back, an interesting sticky note about how he still couldn't find my number 3 that I loaned to him to read and he lost for a long period of time. However, I did get that back. And here it is. I never managed to find this in my own hands, digging through boxes or anything, but I don't care. It was a much better story. Those sticky notes were hilarious, and the collection is finally complete. I have the number 4. I have the full thing here. I'm able to read it. I have them all digitally at this point as well, so I'm not actually reading and damaging my comics. But, man, I paid $10 for number 2. I didn't even notice that. I do have one more piece of Uncanny X-Force, though, to talk about that's in my collection. Not a comic, although they did do some Fear Itself Uncanny X-Force, and I managed to collect those as well, but they're not part of this. What I have is an action figure from 2018, part of the Marvel Legends series, Uncanny X-Force. I'm pretty sure my brother bought me this as well, maybe as my birthday in 2018, because he knew how much I liked this, and this thing was awesome. I don't remember where I got this specifically. I remember some of these especially. I don't remember this one, but yeah, that outfit, the entire story, they apparently have made more Uncanny X-Force, and boy, let me tell you, in researching this, I found out that they've made more action figures of Deadpool for Uncanny X-Force. I would buy them if I had money. If I had unlimited money where I could just buy things to have in my collection again, which is, I can't, and kind of why I do this video series, to look back and appreciate what I do have, because I do not have the money to do this anymore, I would buy them in a heartbeat, just because of how much I enjoyed this series. Truly. I don't try to recommend to many people, but I honestly, if you in any way like good stories, comics, Wolverine, it was the only character. Okay, I knew Wolverine and I knew Deadpool a little bit going into this, but I'd actually never read anything about them. I knew the Wolverine from the movies. Deadpool, I know that Deadpool was in one of the X-Men movies. I did not know that until all the memes about it came out later, about them taking Deadpool and sewing his mouth shut in that X-Men movie. I didn't know that was Deadpool. I knew of Deadpool after that point, and now I know Deadpool quite well because I've read fairly a good amount of comics at this point, but back then, I was just more collecting than anything. Fantastic series. Hands down, if you have an option to get an omnibus or any way where you can go read this, I highly, highly recommend it. Fantastic. For all of these reasons, this is something that I really like.